Everyone to Daf Yomi 1 week at a time, Masechet Bava Kamma. This is our 13th lesson, and we are going to be reviewing Daf 84 through 90 today. And we're continuing to discuss the concept of an eye for an eye. If you remember last week, we started the discussion that when the Torah says an eye for an eye, it is not meant to be taken literally. It is figurative, and therefore it means that if you poke out someone's eye, you need to pay them the value of an eye, not that you poke out someone else's eye. Today's Daf 84, goes through many different permutations on how we know from the verse that it is speaking figuratively and not literally. So the first explanation on Daf 84 is the fact that it says, Ken yinaten lo, you need to give it to him. The Gemara says, what do you give to another person? You give them money. And this shows that you need to pay. Also because these words are superfluous, and therefore we can use them for our understanding of the verse. It also says a hand for a hand. Again, what goes from hand to hand? Again, it is money. The Gemara says, well, maybe, none of these explanations are 100% clear. Another explanation is, if you think that you can, pull out somebody else's eye, well, he might die if you blind him, and you're not allowed to kill him. You're only allowed to take out his eye. Therefore, it must be that the Torah is talking about payment and not actually pulling out somebody's eye. We say that you pay damage and you pay for pain. And we're going to talk more about pain in a little bit. And again, each one of these proofs can be refuted. So the Gemara continues to think of, to posit other explanations of how we understand that it is figurative. So another one is that it says ayin tachat ayin, right? An eye for an eye. So the Gemara says that's also used for the word for when discussing the injury with an ox. And we know that with an ox you pay. So too with a person you should pay. The Gemara says, but wait a minute. We know that it also says that if a person kills another person, so it says nefesh tachat nefesh, right? A soul for a soul. And there it is literal, right? If you kill somebody, you are liable for the death penalty. So the Gemara says, how do you know that when it says an eye for an eye, it's figurative, but a soul for a soul is literal? So the Gemara says, well, we're going to compare damage to damage, which is a person who damages and an animal who damages. Both of those are paying. But when we're talking about killing somebody, so then that is capital punishment, and that is a different way to learn, a different limud, a different way to understand the verses. Or finally, there's another verse that says that when a person damages, it also uses the word tachat, meaning in compensation for, and there it is speaking about compensation, and therefore, as we said, an eye for an eye is figurative and not literal. There are stories here of, the Gemara talks about stories of animals that injure children, and that you have to pay for it, and that the damager obviously is the one who pays for the damage that is done. The courts in Bavel, we know that the Jewish community was very strong in Babylon, in Babylonia, in Bavel, but they couldn't authorize payments of penalties. They could authorize payments for compensation, but not for a penalty. A penalty in Hebrew is knas, as opposed to what we say in the Gemara, we say mammon, which really means money, but it means the principal value that needs to be paid back. So then the question is, let's say, and here in the case of a damager, right, the damager has to pay the damage that was done, and plus any penalty that is incurred as well. But if the person seized the property, so then that would be, they would be allowed to keep it. If an animal causes damage to another animal or to a person, or a person caused damage to an animal, you could collect payment in Bavel, because there we are talking about damage, but damage from the animal, right? If a person damaged another person or an animal caused damage to another person, so then you cannot collect in Bavel, because again, this is seen as compensation, this is seen as a penalty, as a knas. Also because you require expert judges in these cases, which they did not have in Bavel. However, the Gemara tells us that the courts of Bavel acted as agents for the courts of Israel, for admissions, right? If someone admitted something, or for loans, or when they were certain what the case would be, or as we said, they could judge monetary cases but not penalty cases, or they could judge common cases but not exceptions to cases. Now the Gemara is going to talk about tsa'ar, right? Tsa'ar means pain, and the question is, how can you pay or compensate for pain? So first, the Gemara tells us that you do pay for pain even when there is no injury. Here we'll use the word injury as a bruise, right? So if there's no bruise left, but there was pain, you still pay. So the Gemara gives the case of burning someone's fingernail. It doesn't cause a bruise, I guess, but it does cause pain. Some do say that you need to cause not only pain, but also some sort of injury. Daf 85 says, how do we evaluate how much you pay for pain or suffering? So we say that it's the amount of money someone would pay to have this injury, so the Gemara says, right, there's a case where, let's say, a hand is already damaged, so you're only assessing pain and not damage, or he's already sentenced to lose his hand. How much would he pay to have it, chopped off, versus with a potion which would be painless, right? How much money would you pay to prevent yourself from suffering this amount of pain? Okay, we know that you also have to pay medical bills. This is called ripui, like from the word refu'ah, which is healing. So if a wound occurs from the injury, so you need to pay all the medical bills, plus unemployment. We're going to get to unemployment in a minute. Or you don't have to pay unemployment. Maybe you only have to pay the medical bills, or neither. And then, the question is, right, what if a person takes a bandage and bandages the injury to prevent pain, but it might cause more injury, right? Maybe a sore or something like that. Could they do that or not? Or maybe you can't bandage excessively, but within reason you could. And the Gemara tells us that employment or unemployment and medical bills are linked together. The verse says, "Rapo yirapeh," you should heal the person. This gives permission for doctors to heal, right? We don't just sit back and say, God is going to heal all my wounds. Rather, we say that a doctor is allowed to heal the wounds, right? And God sends the healing, but the doctor actually has to go and do the healing itself. We say that you only pay for the wounds from the injury, but if it's unrelated, so then you do not have to pay for the injury, for the medical bills. If the patient doesn't listen to the doctor and the injury got worse, you do not have to pay for the extra doctor's bills. Okay, we pay sa'ar, we pay for the pain, even though you're also paying for damage. And as we said, right, you can pay for pain even when there is no damage. You can also pay for the medical bills, even if there isn't damage or there isn't pain, right? But to heal the person. Okay, the next thing that is going to be paid is called shevet. Shevet means unemployment, right? The person is sitting and they are not working. We said we don't say, oh, you're a neurosurgeon, so I'm going to give you, thousands of dollars a day. Rather, we say that this injured person, the only kind of work that he could do is being a watchman. And therefore, he gets paid as if he is a watchman. I guess what we would call probably minimum wage. He does not get more because don't forget, you're also getting paid for the damage and you're also getting paid for the pain. So when we're talking about unemployment, you're getting minimum wage and you're not getting what you would normally make. Okay. The Gemara gives a case of a person who slowly is injured, one thing after the other. And do we say that we value his competency in being able to work? Do we say that you pay everything because this person can't work at all? Or does the court only evaluate it each step of the way? Right, we look at each injury individually or maybe all together. Okay, Daf 86 talks about if you wound a parent, but you didn't make, again, you injure them, but you didn't make any wounds. We know that that is forbidden in the Torah. However, if there is no wound, so then you pay for all the damages, but you are not going to get capital punishment. If there is a wound, right, some sort of injury, a physical injury that you could see, the person will get capital punishment, but they will then not have to pay the monetary compensation. Let's say a person made, right, so what could that be? Let's say they made the person deaf. The Gemara says, no, if you made your parent deaf, you would get killed for that. Let's say you shaved your father's head, right? That's seen as a temporary injury because it's going to grow back. No, maybe you made the father's hair fall out and it's not going to go back. And therefore you have to pay for all the things that we just mentioned. There's a discussion about temporary injury, if you pay for the injury and the unemployment, or maybe you don't pay for the damage because it's going to get better and it's not long lasting, but you do pay the unemployment. Let's say a person injures a slave. You need to pay damage to the slave, but unemployment goes to the master because the master is the one who's losing out on the work, or maybe all of it goes to the slave. Okay, next thing is boshet. Right, this is the last of the 5 things. Boshet is the embarrassment that a person suffers from the injury. And this is according to the status of every person, right? Each person, again, each one of the parties depends, and we'll see in a minute on what. Or maybe it doesn't depend and everybody pays the same amount. If you're wealthy, you pay more. If you're poor, you pay less. Again, it is more, right? If the person who is damaged is wealthy, so then it's seen as more damage to them. And if they're poor, so it's seen as less. Rabbi Yehuda says a blind person doesn't have boshet. A blind person is not embarrassed. However, if he embarrasses someone, so it seems that he doesn't have to pay because he isn't aware of what he's doing. But if he is embarrassed, so then he does pay. So this is action versus the effect on the person. Okay. If you embarrass someone who is sleeping, you are liable. If the sleeping person embarrasses somebody else, he's exempt. Again, he's sleeping. He doesn't know what he's doing. If you intended to embarrass one person, but ended up embarrassing a different person, so then you pay for the one, like the value of the one you were going to embarrass, and not the one that you embarrassed in the end. Or maybe you don't pay anything because you needed intent, and if you embarrass the wrong person, so then that is not intent. Okay. And then the Gemara discusses if a minor has boshet, has embarrassment or not, and if the minor is old enough to understand what's going on, so then they do have boshet and you do pay for that embarrassment. Okay, the next Mishnah on Daf 86 tells us that if you embarrass someone who is naked, or if they are blind, or if they are sleeping, you are still liable to pay for the embarrassment that you caused. If a person fell from the roof and injured somebody and embarrassed them, so then you're liable for damage, but you're exempt from embarrassment because you didn't intend to embarrass them. Rather, it just happened because you fell off the roof. But it was not your intent. So now the Gemara discusses that what's the difference if the person was clothed or the person was naked. So it says that right. It's why shouldn't it, right? Why does it matter? So the Gemara says no. What does it mean when it says naked? 1 second. So it says, what happened? The person really was dressed, but the wind blew up their tunic, and then a person lifted it up even more. So that is what it means. 1 second. Okay, then the Gemara says, well, if you embarrass a person who is sleeping, and then he died while he was in his sleep, and he didn't feel the embarrassment. So the question is, do you have to pay that person or the person's inheritors or not, right? Is it because you objectively embarrassed them and therefore you need to pay? Or do we say they never knew it because they were sleeping and then they never woke up, so you don't have to pay? A deaf mute person and a minor do have boshet, meaning if you embarrass them, you have to pay. But someone who is insane does not have boshet, right? They don't know what's going on. Right. And then the question is, right, is there objective boshet? Or is it subjective? A minor, we say maybe even if the minor doesn't know what's going on, maybe because the family is embarrassed, so then you have to pay, or because the minor is old enough to understand that he's being embarrassed and therefore you have to pay. we said a blind person who embarrasses someone has to pay, but a blind person does not get certain punishments for certain things, right? So if a blind person kills someone by accident, they do not go to the city of refuge, to the Ir Miklat. They do not get lashes, or they do not get capital punishment. This is all based on a verse. And since we're talking about blind people, Daf 87 tells us that blind people are exempt from the commandments. And they're also not involved in boshet, in embarrassment. But interestingly enough, Rabbi Yossi, who is in the Gemara, who was blind, says at first I was so happy when they said that I don't have to do commandments, because I thought if I do them, I get extra credit. However, when he learned the idea that you get more credit when you are obligated for a mitzvah, right? This is the concept of gadol hamitzuveh ve'oseh, right? Greater is the person who is commanded to do a mitzvah, and he gets a greater reward than someone who isn't commanded to. So he said, oh, I want the law not to be like that, so that I would be, excuse me, he said he wanted him, he wanted to be obligated to do mitzvot so that he could get the reward for doing the mitzvot. Next Mishnah on Daf 87, a person who injures is more stringent than an animal who injured, right? Because a person pays the 5 things that we just mentioned, as opposed to an animal who only pays for damage. And as we've seen previously, a person pays if he hits a woman and then she miscarries, so then the person pays for that. But if the animal did that damage, you do not pay for that damage. If you hurt your parents without bruising them, or hurt, right, we did this already, right, or hurt a friend on Yom Kippur, so then you end up having to pay those 5 things that we just mentioned, because they're not liable for capital punishment. But if you injure, we're going to continue first. If you injure a Jewish slave, you have to pay everything except for unemployment. And if you injure someone else's non-Jewish slave, you have to pay everything. Or, as we said, some people say there's no such thing as boshet, as embarrassment for a slave. Okay, a slave and a woman, again, you pay if you injure them, but they don't pay if they injure, because a slave and a woman do not have their own money. Therefore, they do not have to pay if they injure. If you injure and bruise your parent or injure a person on Shabbat, you're exempt from payment because you are liable for capital punishment. And if you injure your non-Jewish slave, you're exempt from any payment. So now the Gemara is going to explain, if you injure a young girl, who do you pay? The father or the girl? Right? We know that the father gets anything that the daughter finds or if she makes, so he gets everything. But maybe if she's damaged, if she's injured, she gets paid herself. So the Gemara explains that unemployment, shevet, goes to the father, right? Because again, he's getting her paycheck. But injury, nezek, damage, that goes to her. If you damage your own adult son, so then you have to pay him right away. If you injure your young son, so you have to do a sigula, we're going to see what that means in a minute. And if you injure your young daughter, you are exempt. But if others harm your daughter, they pay the father. Or you don't have to pay for your own children. Or no, it depends on if you're actually supporting those children or not. We see that you have to feed your Jewish slave and your daughter, right? You have to support your children. If a father pays for his children's food, then if they find something on the street, they have to give it to their father, right? Because that's in exchange for the food that they are getting. We said that if the minor, the son, the child, is hurt, the father has to do a segula. What's a segula? Either it's, so the Gemara says it's like a trust fund. Either you buy him a Sefer Torah, a Torah scroll, so that he can learn, or you get him a palm tree so that he can eat the dates. Okay. Daf 88 tells us that a slave, a slave doesn't have embarrassment, doesn't have boshet. He's not seen as your brother. And therefore, you do not have to pay for embarrassment, but he is involved in a case of edim zomemin, right? Edim zomemin, we've discussed this before. A group of witnesses comes and says, Bob killed Joe. And then they say, wait a minute, Bob, you couldn't know that Bob killed Joe because you guys, the witnesses, you were with us at the movies, right? The verse is, Imanu hayitem. You were with us at the movies, so you have no idea what happened, in the next town over. And then they get the punishment that they were trying to get the other person to be punished by. Okay. Next, we're talking about who has rights. We were talking about embarrassment, then we were talking about slaves. Here, we're going to talk about a mother-son relationship. The mother of Rav Shmuel wrote all of her money to her son, even though she was remarried. She went into a second marriage. She didn't want her second husband to inherit her, which is the way it normally works, but she wanted to make sure that her money went to her children or her son. So when she died, they gave all of her money to her son. But then the stepfather said, right, the husband said, wait a minute, I can go and take it from this son because really it's mine. So the Gemara says, no, she can give it to the son, and it is not the ownership, or the husband does not have the right to take this money. Okay. There's another Braita that teaches that if a father wrote money to one son and then the son sold, let's say, the land, and then the father died, so the sale is valid because the son is the inheritor, and when he inherits, then the sale would be valid. But here, right, our case with the mother who gave the money to the son, the son is not her direct inheritor. It's the husband who is the inheritor, and therefore the husband can go and take this money. So the Gemara says, no, this is actually based on the decrees that were done in Usha, Takanat Usha. We have learned this before. When the rabbis were sitting in Usha, that's in the Galilee, they decided certain laws that they put into effect in order to make society more livable. So the decree was that if a wife sells her property when the husband is still alive, and then she dies, the husband can go and take back that property. And the reason they made this decree is to prevent husbands and wives from fighting or from not getting married. And therefore, they said that that is what needed to be done. Daf 89 teaches us that takanat usha is only for the valuables or the property that a woman brings into her marriage, that the husband has the rights to the fruit or the produce from that land, but he doesn't have the rights to the land itself. That's called nichsei milog. But there's also something called nichsei son ubarzel. Those things become his property completely, even though at the end he needs to give it back. But in the meantime, the husband does have the rights to this property completely. Okay. We say that a woman doesn't have money to pay if she damages someone. So the Gemara says this proves that we follow takanat usha, right? That we say that the woman cannot sell her property while her husband is still alive because he is the inheritor. So we see that a woman doesn't really have any money. She can't get money from even selling her property, right? She can't sell her property, therefore she doesn't have money. But maybe she could sell her what's called tovat hana'ah. This is the value of the benefit of having this item. So maybe she could sell that, or maybe she can sell her ktuva. We see that really she does have things of value, so let her sell them, and then she can pay the damages that she did. So the Gemara says no, she cannot sell her ktuva because we know that a couple is not allowed to be married without a ktuva. Therefore, she can't sell her ktuva. But maybe she can sell, again, the benefit of the ktuva, not the ktuva itself. So the Gemara says, no, that's really only words, and it can't be sold. Or, again, another opinion is that it can be sold. Right, but on the other hand, we do not make her sell whatever items that she has. She does not have to sell them, and as we said, she does not have to pay for damages that she does. Maybe we do make her to sell to the person that she damaged, so that she pays them back. The Gemara says no. Because maybe she might say, "Oh, I will." Can we hold on 1 second? My soldier son is just calling me. 1 minute. Okay, hold on 1 minute. Sorry. So sorry. There's a rule that if our soldier sons call, so then I have to stop everything. But Baruch Hashem, everything is fine. I will call him back in 20 minutes. Okay. So we were talking about the woman selling her ktuva, and we said we do not force the woman to sell her ktuva. Again, right, she doesn't have to sell it because they're not allowed to stay married if she doesn't have the ktuva. So we do not force her to sell it. What happens if she damaged her own husband, right? Does she lose her ktuva? The Gemara says, no, she doesn't lose her ktuva. Again, because she cannot be with her husband without a ktuva. And then we say, maybe no, right? Maybe her ktuva is, let's say, maybe it's worth a lot of money. So then maybe he can take the difference of what he owes her, but therefore, right, if he divorces her, he's going to lose a lot of money. So we say that's not the case. And therefore we say that she is not obligated to pay for damage that she inflicted. Or maybe the case that we're talking about with the woman giving the money to her son is something that we actually learned in Ktuvot, which was Ktuvat Banin Dichrin. This was a document that a woman can sign saying that before she gets married to her second husband, she wants to make sure that any money she's bringing into the marriage goes to her children, right, her male children who inherit her, and this property goes to them and not to her husband. Of course, this can only be done before she gets married. Once she gets married, all of her property is I don't want to say automatically, but is already seen as owned by or potentially owned by the husband. And then maybe that's the case, that let's say she had this ktuva for the kids, and then she sold it, and then she died. So the children still inherit the mother, and the buyer only gets the money if the husband dies. Since we mentioned takanat usha, so the Gemara says that another one of takanat usha is if she brings slaves into the marriage, if she knocks out their tooth, right, or the eye, so then the slave goes free because really they're her slaves. If the husband does it, they do not go free because it's not like the husband really owns the slaves. He's just allowed to use them. Or we say nobody goes free. It doesn't matter who did the injury because nobody has full ownership of these slaves, and therefore it is a machloket. Everyone agrees that if you have the rights to the produce of the land, that it's not as if you own the land itself. Again, in Hebrew, right, or in the Gemara, it's called the right to the peirot, right, the fruit, the produce, or the rights to the guf. Guf means the body, but it means the actual land. So even if you have the rights to the fruit that's on the trees, let's say, it doesn't mean that you have rights to the land itself. Okay. There's a machloket in the Gemara here if everybody held like the takanot of Usha. Okay, last daf for today's daf 90. If you sanctify something, land or something, or the item that you have is bread, and it becomes right, it's Pesach, and then after Pesach, now it's chametz, right? It's forbidden to eat it. Or if you set a slave free, all of these release any lien that was on this item, right? Either the slave or the field. If you do one of these three things, it releases the lien on that property. So now the Gemara says, no, even if the wife frees her slave, the husband still has a lien on it. Therefore, the slave does not go free. Or maybe we said, right, on one option is everyone holds like takanat usha, right, all of these decrees that were made later on. Or maybe they did not hold like these decrees. And then there's a machloket if you have the right to the peirot. Does it mean that it is as if you own the actual land or not? Let's say you sell a slave to somebody, but you keep the slave for 30 days. Then during those 30 days, the slave dies. So the question is, if the original owner struck the slave and is responsible, so then we say that it shows that if you have rights to the here it's a person, to the slave, right? If you have rights in those 30 days to the slave, so then it's as if you own his body. Or only if the new master strikes him. If that's the case, then he's the one who's liable. Or no, both have the ability to set the slave free in that case. Or neither have this day or two that the Gemara talks about, that if, let's say, a master strikes a slave and he dies within 1 or 2 days, so then the master is liable for that. But if he dies after those 2 days, so then he is not liable. Okay. We said that the wife cannot sell her nichsei melog. Again, the things that she's bringing in, that the husband has the rights to the produce. And again, we said why? Because neither spouse has full rights to this land or produce. A slave owned by 2 people does not go free because neither has full rights. Okay, next, the last Mishnah for today. If a person hits someone's ear or yelled into someone's ear, so you need to pay damage, either a sela or a maneh, which is much more. If you injure, if the injury is embarrassing, again, you have to pay boshet. Again, these are like minor injuries, right? You pulled someone's hair or their ear, or you uncovered a woman's hair, right? A woman's hair is a married woman, her hair is supposed to be covered. If you uncover it, so then that's embarrassing. Therefore, you have to pay for that embarrassment. All of this is according to the honor of the person, right? If they're rich or if they're poor, the Gemara or the Mishnah says, though, right? No, even poor people, we view them as if they are wealthy. So they do get a lot of money for any embarrassment that they had. We said that a man who uncovers the hair of a woman is told to pay 400 zuz. Let's say, so now we have a story. He uncovers her hair, and then he's told to pay her the money. Then he does this like trick. He waits and he tricks her into uncovering her own hair, and then he shows witnesses. Oh, look, she just uncovered her hair by herself. And then he takes her to court and he says, I don't want to pay for her embarrassment. She just did it herself. And it shows that she's not embarrassed. So Rabbi Akiva says it doesn't matter if she embarrasses herself. If you embarrass her, you need to pay. So that is all in the Mishnah. We'll do a few lines of the Gemara. So we said that you need to pay a maneh. This is a silver coin for, again, embarrassing a person. From here, the Gemara goes into a whole discussion if witnesses can become judges, meaning if you saw a crime happen, now could you all sit together and become a court? Or do we say, no, a court is made up of witnesses who saw the crime and judges who did not see the crime. And the Gemara discusses here, right, again, who needs to see and then who needs to hear the testimony, right? The judge does not need to see, let's say, the murder weapon, but they need to hear the testimony of a person who saw the murder weapon. So it really depends on if the person can be a judge, if they are the witness, and vice versa. So I think we're going to end here. I'm actually traveling next week. So what we're going to do is next week's class, I'm going to teach on Sunday, meaning in a week and a half, basically. I'll teach from Thursday's daf to Wednesday's daf. I'm going to teach it on Sunday. And then on Wednesday, we will have our regular class teaching that week's daf. So I apologize if it will be a little bit off, but it's the only way I can figure out how to do anything. Okay, I will stop the recording, and then if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Wishing everyone a Shabbat Shalom.
No questions, but tell your son thank you.